Book 2 of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics highlights the concept of habit as something that is crucial for understanding Aristotle's account of moral development. However, the prevalence of habit in Aristotle's explanation can lead to certain misconceptions about his view. Specifically, it is common to think that Aristotle believes that virtues are habits, that virtuous people behave courageously or honestly in just the way that a person ties her shoes or uses her turn signal. Yet this was not what Aristotle had in mind. In this video, we will discuss the relationship between virtue and habit in order to answer the following question: are virtues habits? To begin, let's recall some basic points about Aristotle's account of the origin and development of moral virtue. Aristotle has told us that we do not become virtuous primarily through teaching. Neither are we virtuous by nature, although nature does give us the capacity or ability to become virtuous. Instead, Aristotle believes that the process of developing virtue is based upon habituation. Nature gives us the ability to become virtuous or vicious, but that potential is only fulfilled through developing the right kinds of habits. We all have the ability to be just, courageous, and honest, or the ability to become unjust, cowardly, and dishonest. So, which path we take depends upon what actions we reinforce in our character through habit. However, if virtue is developed through habit, then it may be tempting to think that virtues must be habits. After all, when we learn to tie our shoes, we ingrain this action through habit, and as a consequence, tying our shoes actually becomes a habit. So perhaps we might think it is the same with virtue. We first become honest by consistently exercising the habit of truth-telling, and as a consequence, telling the truth just becomes another in the litany of instinctual habits that inform and comprise our everyday lives. Yet, as stated by Christopher Warney in his commentary on Aristotle's Ethics, although virtues are habituated, it would be a mistake to regard them as habits. The term habit sometimes suggests that the agent performs the action without thinking about it. Such behavior is sometimes characterized as mindless for precisely this reason. However, the virtues are not mindless. A person only acts virtuously if he knows what he is doing and decides to do it. So, virtues are habituated states of character, but are not themselves habits. Our ability to act virtuously is strengthened and developed by habit. But the virtuous trait itself is not a habit. We may be able to mindlessly tie our shoes, but we cannot act with honesty, courage, justice, and temperance in a mindless fashion. And virtuous action cannot be mindless because acting virtuously always requires a careful process of deliberation. Take, for example, the virtue of honesty. We might think that if any virtue could be a mindless habit, then this would be the one. After all, suppose it is true that it is always wrong to tell a lie. Well then, in that case, isn't being honest rather simple? Don't we just have to make sure that we never say anything that we know to be false? Of course, this might be a difficult task because it does require confronting temptation. But the thought process itself doesn't seem all that complicated. Provided someone has conquered whatever might tempt them to be dishonest, couldn't they tell the truth in an entirely mindless fashion? Even here, however, the situation isn't so straightforward. Suppose you are a medical professional caring for a patient with a severe illness. Imagine also that you believe this patient will be harmed if she knew the full severity of her condition. Perhaps you fear she might lose the will to fight her disease if she knew this information. Now, at one level, there is the question of whether it would be acceptable to lie in this circumstance. But in accordance with our previous assumption, even if it is wrong to lie to the patient and we know that it is wrong, there are still plenty of decisions to be made and other considerations to be taken into account. You may be required to tell the patient the truth, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't think about the tone you take in the conversation. You will still have to think about how best to convey the information. In addition, you may have to decide whether it would first be better to inform the family instead of communicating with the patient directly. Furthermore, there are even difficult philosophical issues to resolve here. Suppose you never say anything to the patient you know is false, but you also don't volunteer more information than the patient specifically asked for. Then does that qualify as lying? These are all difficult questions, and answering them requires using our capacity for reason and taking into account the broader social and psychological facts pertaining to the patient's situation. For this reason, we can certainly see why virtuous action, even for those virtues that might first appear to be the most clear-cut and straightforward, can never be completely mindless. Truly habitual actions are performed in precisely the same way, regardless of circumstance. These become like a second nature that we do not really have to think about. Yet, as we have seen, acting virtuously requires a careful sensitivity to the context of our actions and the broader situation that we happen to find ourselves in. This is true of honesty, and it is also true of the other virtues like courage, justice, temperance, and generosity. Consequently, while Aristotle believes that virtue results from habit, it would be a mistake to interpret Aristotle as believing that virtues are habits.